Few dishes command attention quite like the giant Korean hamburger steak. The moment it arrives at the table, sizzling hot and glistening with rich gravy, you know this is not just dinner. It's a culinary statement. It's larger, heartier, and far more indulgent than your typical patty, and it carries the soul of Korean comfort food with a modern twist. Whether you've tasted a humble hamburger steak before or not, this version takes everything you thought you knew about meat and reinvents it with Korean flair. Known locally as Hambak Steak, this dish is not the handheld burger we're used to in the West. Instead, it's a massive, juicy patty, almost like a cross between a meatloaf and a hamburger, served on a plate, smothered in savory brown gravy. You know, it's beloved in Korean home kitchens and casual restaurants because it balances Western-inspired flavors with distinctly Korean comfort. The idea is simple, really. High-quality ground beef, seasoned generously, cooked into a tender, steak-sized patty, and finished with a sauce that ties everything together. The giant version, well, it magnifies the drama, often big enough to feed two or to satisfy one serious appetite. The magic of making this steak giant is not just the portion size. A larger patty allows the outside to form a gorgeous crust, while the inside stays unbelievably juicy. When sliced open, steam rises from the tender center, releasing aromas of garlic, onion, and beef. Unlike smaller patties that can dry out quickly, a giant steak locks in moisture and flavor, making every bite decadent. To master this dish at home, exact measurements matter. Here is a reliable recipe that yields a perfect giant steak for 2 to 3 servings. 500 grams or about 1.1 pounds of ground beef, ideally 80% lean. 200 grams or 7 ounces of ground pork for added tenderness. 1 medium onion, finely minced. 2 cloves of garlic, minced. Alright, so you'll need 1 large egg, 60 grams or about half a cup of breadcrumbs, 120 milliliters, that's also half a cup of milk. And let's not forget 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. Next up, add 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Oh, and you'll want 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil for frying. For the gravy, it's 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and 500 milliliters, or 2 cups of beef broth. Alright, so for the gravy seasoning, you'll need 2 tablespoons of ketchup, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 1 teaspoon of soy sauce, and 1 teaspoon of sugar. Then, just add salt and pepper to taste. The first step is preparing the patty. Soak the breadcrumbs in milk until they're soft, then combine them with ground beef, ground pork, onion, garlic, egg, soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, salt, and pepper. Now, mix gently but thoroughly, making sure everything binds together without overworking the meat. Shape the mixture into one massive patty, a bit thicker in the center, so it cooks evenly all the way through. First, heat up some vegetable oil in a heavy skillet or, a good old cast iron pan. Then place the patty carefully in the pan and sear it over medium heat until the outside develops a golden brown crust, which usually takes about 4 to 5 minutes per side. Once both sides are nicely browned, go ahead and reduce the heat to low, cover the pan, and let the steak cook through for another 10 to 12 minutes. This slow finishing method really guarantees the inside cooks evenly while staying juicy. As the steak rests, it's time to prepare the gravy in the same pan, so you can soak up all those flavorful browned bits. Melt some butter, whisk in flour to form a roux, and let it cook until it's golden, just like that. Slowly pour in beef broth, whisking constantly to avoid lumps. Then add ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, sugar, salt, and pepper. Let it all simmer until the sauce thickens to a silky consistency. Pour the gravy generously over the steak, letting it cascade across the sides. In Korea, this dish is typically served with a scoop of white rice, a fried egg on top, and a side of pickled vegetables like kimchi or pickled radish. The balance of savory beef tangy pickles and rich gravy makes for an unforgettable experience. For a more global touch, you could serve it with creamy mashed potatoes, buttered corn, or even roasted vegetables. The key is to pair it with sides that absorb the gravy well, since the sauce is the heart of the dish. Hamburger steak may have its origins in Western cuisine, but the Korean interpretation has become a cultural treasure in its own right. It represents Korea's adaptability in the culinary world, blending Western techniques with flavors that suit local palates. For generations, families have made Hambak steak at home because it's filling, affordable, and celebratory. The giant version, however, takes that tradition and turns it into a showcase dish perfect for gatherings or special occasions. This dish also reflects the global journey of comfort food. Just as Japanese hambagu and American Salisbury steak became part of local cuisines, it's interesting how these dishes travel and adapt. The Korean GIANT Hamburger Steak has found a place in the hearts of food lovers worldwide. Its universal appeal comes from the fact that, well, no matter where you're from, a juicy patty with gravy feels like home. Consistency is key. Always use a mix of beef and pork for the best balance of flavor and texture. Pork adds juiciness that beef alone just cannot achieve. Now don't rush the searing process. Those crispy edges are what really elevate the dish. And when you're making the gravy, be patient with the roux and broth. A slow whisk ensures a velvety finish every single time. Finally, allow the steak to rest for at least 5 minutes before slicing. This step, it prevents juices from escaping and keeps the meat wonderfully tender. If you want to experiment, consider adding finely chopped mushrooms to the patty mixture for an earthy depth of flavor, or swapping part of the beef broth with red wine for a more complex sauce. The beauty of this dish is how easily it adapts to your creativity while still staying rooted in tradition. There's something communal about sharing a giant steak at the center of the table. It encourages conversation, laughter, and, a real appreciation of good food. It's a dish that feels both indulgent and comforting, the kind of meal that honestly becomes a memory. The giant Korean hamburger steak is more than just a larger portion of meat. It's an experience that combines rich flavor, comforting texture, and, cultural storytelling. It belongs in the spotlight of global culinary heritage because, it proves that food is not only about sustenance but about connection and joy. When you master this dish, you'll be carrying forward a piece of culinary history, reimagined in your own kitchen. If this recipe and story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to Global Culinary Heritage and, share this with your fellow food enthusiasts. Great food deserves to be celebrated together, and there's no better way to start than with a giant, sizzling Korean hamburger steak.